阿里。好，首先谢谢大家今天来参加我们这个线上 Zoom 的 workshop 非常荣幸呢，我们今天请到一位嘉宾他是现任的列治文的市议员Mr. Andy Hobbs 先生他同时呢也是温哥华前警察局的局长Superintendent 今天我们的主题呢就是想让他来分享一下在加拿大其实警察的服务也是属于公众服务的一部分，就 public service 这一部分我们这个 workshop 呢其实已经举办了很多期了有不同的社区的一些精英人士成功人士来跟我们分享一些加拿大的各种社会政治法律的各种信息我们的主要的机构呢现就是由反对仇恨亚裔关注组去驱动，当然同一时间有的时候我们也会以加拿大华裔投票促进会和我们另外的一个协会就是加拿大国际精英俱乐部这三个主要的协会呢一起来协办这样的一个活动给我们的华人朋友们Okay, let me first introduce our guest today, and Mr. Andy Hobbs, and he's the Richmond City Councillor, and he's also a former Vancouver Police Department's superintendent. And today's topic is about public service, especially in the policing section. And we would like to have Andy to talk about and share some information to us. And Andy will have a translator, and who is Sunny. Sunny is sitting right next to Andy. So the format is very simple, and we will have Andy to talk about anything he wants to share, and then he will work with Sunny to speak in Mandarin to translate. And this workshop is being organized by the Stop Anti-Asian Hate Crime Advocacy Group, and also in collaboration with another two organizations. One is the Chinese Canadian Go to Vote Association, and the other was the International Elite Club of Canada. And so let's get this started. So Andy, welcome to the workshop. Can you please introduce yourself?
Thanks, Ivan, and thanks for inviting me to be here. And I'm happy to be here with a good friend of mine, Sunni Chu.
非常感谢这次的邀请。那我在我旁边的是我朋友，就是 Sunni Chu。
It's a really important topic because Richmond is a very diverse community, and I know that policing is something that may be very different in Canada and Richmond than it is in different parts of the world where people may have come from.
今天的这个话题其实非常重要，因为呢，讲加拿大还有包括 Richmond 也是一个非常多元的社会。那其实呢，每个国家每个地方呢，他们的那个警察的制度都可能会有差异，所以今天也想跟大家分享一下。
So I grew up in Richmond. I've lived here quite a long time. I've gone to elementary school, junior high, senior high, Richmond High graduate, and also a UBC graduate.
我从小就在 Richmond 长大，从小学开始一直都在那个 Richmond 上学，直到后来我就在 UBC 念大学。
And we've raised 3 children who are now adults in Richmond, and we now have 5 grandchildren, and they also are living in Richmond.
那就是我有3个小孩，他们都长大成人了。那现在其实呢，现在就有5个孙儿女都在 Richmond 长大。
So community safety and the well-being of everybody who lives in Richmond is very important to me. It's important to my family, and it's important to me not just for my family, but for all the people living in Richmond.
所以呢，社区安全呢，对我来说，对我的家庭而言也非常重要。那我也很清楚，社区安全呢，就是对每位在 Richmond 社区生活的人也是非常重要。
And just generally speaking about community service, I'm sure many of you volunteer for many different things in your own lives. For me, it's been a very important part of my life. So starting in grade 5 was my first volunteer role in the anti-littering campaign for James Thompson Elementary.
那我也了解到，就社区服务是非常重要的。我相信呢，就是在座很多位朋友呢，都有担任过志愿者，担任过义工。那其实我从小学，就是我从 Grade 5开始呢，就有在那个学校里面当义工。
And so that's just something I've done in my entire life. I've coached teams. I volunteered for 20 years raising funds for the Canadian Cancer Society. And I volunteered with a number of organizations. I've been the president of the Richmond Kigus Swim Club. Richmond Kigus Swim Club. It's a swimming club. Richmond.
那就是我在过去多年呢，我也在就是那个 Richmond 呢有很多就是体育团队，我有担任过教练。那在20余年的时间呢，我也为就是加拿大的癌症协会筹款。那还有就是我也曾经在就是社区的一个就是游泳的那个协会的担任过主席。
So I believe volunteering is important for anybody, no matter what you do in life. Some people volunteer and do things. Other people contribute money and donate.
那其实当然了，是社区每位呢都有不同的方式来贡献社会。那有些人会担任义工，有些人呢可能就会选择捐款这个方式。
So more recently, I was the chair of the Britannia Heritage Shipyard Society, which is down in Steveston. I was also on the Tourism Richmond board, and I am on the Royal Canadian Marine Search and Rescue Society board. Those are the volunteers that go out in the middle of the night and save people who are having boat problems or sinking.
那其实，在过去担任那个市议员之前呢，我也是在就是Richmond 的英属不列颠那个有一个船厂的遗址的协会呢担任主席，我也是那个列治文旅游局的理事，再加上呢，我之前呢也同时在那个皇家海岸的那个搜救队呢，我也是担任一位理事。
So that's all things that I've done while I worked full time and had a pretty busy job. So my career, which you've heard a bit about, I started off as a constable and worked through many different roles and a few promotions and retired as a superintendent commanding North Command in the city of Vancouver.
那我这些志愿者的工作呢，都是我一边就是全职工作一边做的。那我就从以前从一个警员开始，就一直升职，直到担任警士为止，就是以警士之位退休。那我当时呢是在那个温哥华警察局的其中一个what is it, North? Did you say the North?
North Command. It's the north half of Vancouver.
OK， 就是当时我就负责管辖呢，就温哥华的北部的我就是管辖温哥华北部的一位警士。
And I was also chief of transit police for a year and did many other jobs.
我当时呢也是那个温哥华就是交通部的一个，就是当时我也是那个主席。
So that's enough about police and my background. But the one thing I want to say about Richmond is, having lived here for a long time, is it's always been a diverse community. The numbers have kind of reversed in terms of percentages, but there was always a very big Japanese population. There was always a significantly large Chinese population and South Asian population, and of course, people of European background. So Richmond's always been diverse and still is, and that's something I really like about Richmond.
其中一点呢，就是我特别喜欢 Richmond，就是一直以来这么多年，它都非常的多元。那当然了，就是人口呢会随着时间呢就有所变化，从以前到现在呢，我们都有很多，就是我们都有一个日本族裔的社区，我们也有很多华人。也有很多南亚裔的居民，当然了，就是也还有一些就是欧洲移民，就是或者是加上是来自欧洲的居民，这方面我是非常喜欢的，我很喜欢 Richmond 的多元性。
So now I'll talk about policing in particular and try to help people who maybe aren't familiar with policing in Canada. So the thing about policing in Canada, first of all, is it all falls under what we call the rule of law. So police are subject to the rule of law like anybody else.
那就首先呢，我现在就可以讲一下关于就是本地的警察的一个制度。那第一点最重要的就是我们都是就是本地的警方都是依法办事，我们都是要遵从就是本地的法律和法规。
Policing wasn't invented in Canada. It wasn't invented in the United Kingdom. Different civilizations have had their version of policing. Persia had its version of policing. China, in the Chu and Jin kingdoms, had their version of policing with prefectures and prefects and magistrates, and they all served the emperor. And women could also serve in those roles. Japan had a similar prefecture system going back thousands of years, China and Japan and Persia.
那从就是警察这个制度呢，也并不是英国或者是加拿大就是说发明的，因为就是从古代文明，从波斯，从就是那个中国，还有就是日本等等的一些古代文明，就很久以前就有这个制度了。那当然就是有些他们是效忠于就是就是当代的就是朝代，就是他们的效忠于他们的皇帝。那当然就是 women could be police。当然就是其实在古代呢，也有就是很多就是女性其实也是可以担任，就是在某一些门也是可以担任那个警察的。
So the Romans had police. They were usually veterans of their army or serving army, but they had police. The French had police. King Louis XIV started the Paris police, and police is actually, I believe, derived from a French word.
那就是讲到警察这个历史的话，其实以前的古罗马人，甚至是法国人也有一个警察的制度。那我相信呢，如果我们追溯历史呢，其实 police 就是警察这个英文的词呢，它是其实本身是法文。
So a little bit of history just to point out that everything didn't start in England or in Canada. It predates North America, European culture by thousands of years.
那其实想表达的是，警察的这个制度呢，就比北美更早、更老，就是还在很久以前呢就已经有这个制度和概念。
Because to every civilization and every culture and every government, one of the most important things is keeping its citizens safe and secure.
因为对于每个文明、每个朝代呢，其实都有一个很重要的事情要做到，就是要保障他们的居民、他们的公民的安全。
So for us in Canada, starting with, our colonial period and leading into Canada becoming a country in 1867, we come under a British parliamentary system and a British system of policing that started with Sir Robert Peel. In about 1829, he formed the London Metropolitan Police. He was also later a Prime Minister of England from 1834 to 35 and 1841 to 46. But he started the modern policing system for England, and that's where our policing system is largely derived. Robert Peel. If you watch The Crown, he's in it.
So he became
Victoria.
So he became a prime minister at the end.
Yeah, he was a prime minister of England twice.
Okay.
And he started the London Metropolitan Police.
Okay. 那其实呢，早在我们在殖民地的时代，因为其实加拿大是在1867年立国的，那早在1829年呢，当时已经引入了就是英国的一个警察的制度，当时就是由那个 Sir Ronald Peel 把他引进加拿大，那他其实呢在英国也有担任过首相。
So he has 9 principles of policing that he put together in 1829 for the London Metropolitan Police. And police throughout the kind of, I guess, English-speaking world anyway, including the United States, learned these 9 principles because they were so good, they're still applicable.
那当时呢，其实就是 Sir Robert Peel 就在成立这个警察的制度的时候呢，他就有9大就是原则规条，就是一直呢就是很多人都沿用至今，因为呢他们都订立的非常好。那我就要说来给大家就是参考一下。
And I am going to share them because they are fundamental to policing in Canada.
因为这些都其实对加拿大日后的警察制度呢也有相当大的影响，相当重要的影响，所以我想跟大家分享一下。
So the basic mission for police is to prevent crime and disorder.
其实最简单的就警察来说最简单最基本的一个任务就是要防止就是罪案，也就是保持安定。
And that's supposed to be an alternative to repression of crime and disorder by military force or the severity of punishment, of legal punishment.
那其实呢，当时就是警察这个制度呢，就是代替了，就是有了警察这个制度呢，我们就不需要通过军人或者是军方去惩罚或者是去对付就是犯罪者，也就是警察这个制度呢，也取代了就是一些非常严苛的一个法律的审判或者惩罚。
Number 2 is the ability of the police to perform their duties is dependent upon the public approval of police existence, of police actions, of police behavior, and the ability of the police to secure and maintain public respect.
那就是警察呢，就是可以履行，之所以可以履行他们的职责呢，是基于公众对警察的肯定，包括他们的存在、他们的行为，然后他们就是维持治安，还有他们就是需要一直都维护就是公众的形象得到大众的支持还有尊重。
Shorten it a bit. And the police must be willing to secure the willing cooperation of the public in the voluntary observance of the law and to be able to secure and maintain public respect. So that's voluntary. The police have to get the voluntary compliance of the public. We don't coerce the public. You don't force the public. You get the public's voluntary and willing compliance with the law.
那第3点呢，就是警方呢就需要能够让大众自愿的去服从那个警方，就是遵守法律，而不是通过任何就是威胁，就是逼使就是那个公众去遵从，而是他们是发自内心的需要自愿的去遵守法律。
And the degree of cooperation of the public that can be secured diminishes proportionately to the necessity for the use of physical force and compulsion in achieving police objectives. So it says the respect that the police and the cooperation that the police get diminishes the more the police use force.
有一个原则非常重要，就是说就是当警方过度使用武力的时候呢，就是逼使来达到一些就是警察的目的的话，这样呢会让就是一般会让大众的配合度减低，所以这个武力还有就是大众的配合度，其实呢他们是你使用的武力越多呢，大众的配合度呢其实是会降低的。
And the police seek and preserve public favor not by catering to public opinion, but by constantly demonstrating absolute impartiality in the service to the law, complete independence without regard to justice or injustice or friendship. So they have to be completely objective. And even in 1829, Sir Robert Peel had this in there, without regard to race or social standing. They have to be ready to exercise courtesy and friendly good humor. in protecting life and property. You can shorten that if you want.
Yeah. 那其实呢，那个警察的独立，还就是需要有完整的独立性，因为他们呢，并不能自己独自的去考虑就是那个法律，就是不能考虑到友谊，不能考虑到那个自己有一个考虑到就是是否正义与否，也不应该考虑到就是那个社会地位，也不应该考虑到族裔。还有呢，其实根据当时第5条大原则呢，其实就是警察也是要对大众就是保持礼貌，也是要保持友好。
And the next one is police should use physical force only to the extent necessary in securing observance to the law and to restore order. Use persuasion and advice and warnings when it's sufficient. So that is about using the minimum amount of force necessary for any situation.
而且警方并不能过度使用武力，有必要他们可以就是提出警告，他们可以游说就是对方，或者是提出建议，但只能在不得已就是就是他们永远都需要遵守一个原则，就是只能使用最低限度的，就是最低程度的武力来解决问题。
And the next one is that the police at all times maintain a relationship with the public that gives reality to this line, and that is the public are the police and the police are the public. That's something that's drilled into every new police officer.
其实呢，警方也是要遵守一个原则，就是大众等于我，我也等于大众。其实这个只有这样子呢，就是警方呢才可以就是全程的投入，全程的专注于服务社会。
And we're almost done. The police should always direct their actions towards their functions and their duty, and never appear to usurp the powers of the judiciary, which is the courts and the judges, by being avenging individuals. The police don't judge who's guilty.
就是警方呢，并不是并不是法官，并不是裁判，他们不需要做出任何裁决，他们呢，只能就是按照他们本身的职责和功能去行使他们的力量。那但是呢，并不能通过法庭就是法律给予的一个权利，就是去对任何个人做出任何报复性的行为。
And the last one is the real test of police effectiveness and law and order is the absence of crime and disorder. It's not the visible evidence of police presence or police action in dealing with crime. The real success is the absence of crime and disorder. And that's why the public and the police are like this.
那其实就是对警方而言，真正的试金石呢，就是如果没有罪案，那一切都有序平稳的话呢，这对警方来说是最好不过的。就是说，并不是也就是说，其实真正的成功就是零罪案才是真正的成功，并不是取决于警方要行使多大的力度，或是采取多少的方案去解决犯罪的这个问题。
So I apologize for boring you with 9 principles, but this is something that was written in 1829, and it's still taught to police throughout North America and Canada today.
不好意思，可能就是刚刚就是分享的有点久，但是呢，其实这9个原则呢，从1829年到现在呢，一直呢对北美、对加拿大的警察的制度都影响深远。
And very simply put, if you want to know about policing in Canada, I've always said to young recruits and to other officers that the most important tool that the police have, it's not a gun, it's not a car, it's not a computer, it's not a radio. The most important tool is legitimacy. Police have to be seen to be legitimate in the eyes of the community they serve. Whether you immigrated 2 years ago from Shanghai, whether you're an Aboriginal who can trace their roots back 5,000 years in North America, or whether your ancestors came from England 200 years ago. It doesn't matter where you come from. The police have to be seen to be legitimate.
其实我也跟很多年轻的警员都有这样分享，我觉得对警察而言最重要的不是枪，不是车，也不是任何工具，而是警方的合法性。因为我们需要大众去服从警方，那就需要证明我们的合法性，也等于说我不管就是市民是来自不同的背景，就是不管您是2年前过来的上海移民，你是原住民，还是呢您是那个英国的移民后裔，其实我们都需要警方都需要跟这些市民证明他们的合法性。
Because one thing that is very predictable is that the police will make mistakes. They will go to the wrong house. They'll arrest the wrong person. They will make mistakes in fulfilling their duty. And when they do that, the public will see that as a good faith mistake and hold the police accountable for the mistakes, but will understand that they were trying to do their duty and were doing it in good faith. And so that's part of the legitimacy that is important, because when you make mistakes, the public has to be understanding.
有一个问题是，警方是无可避免的，总有时候呢会出错，有时候可能就是进错地方，或者是呢就是抓错了人，就是那这个时候呢，当然就是警方呢他们也需要为自己的错误负责，但这个时候呢，大众对警方的印象就很重要，因为他们就会做一个判断，到底这个是不是一个虽然是错误，但是不是一个诚实的，是不是一个就是诚实的错误，还是因为呢这点对警方非常重要，就不能就让大众怀疑他们就是犯错的时候背后的动机或者是的行为。
So another important thing to know about Canada, and many of you would know this, is that the law is supreme, and the supreme law is the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and the police are subject to that. The police can't arrest you without reasonable grounds. They can't detain you and keep you without evidence and reasonable grounds. They can't search you and seize property or search your house or anything like that without justifiable, reasonable grounds to do so.
警方需要遵从法律，那当然我们有宪法的保障，我们还有一个是关于就是公民的自由和权利的法律，就是我们也就是说，警方并不能随意扣留市民，不能随意做任何搜查，就是他们必须就是有合理的原因才能进行以上的行动。
So police also are independent. They're independent from the government. They're independent from the federal government, provincial government, and city government. They operate independently, and they aren't directed by government.
警方的独立性也非常重要，他们并不直接听命于就是每一级的政府， Do you want to clarify when we were just saying they don't directly
they don't
report
they don't direct them in the daily activities. Government does not say to the police, you shall go investigate Sunni. The government doesn't do that. Police will conduct investigations based on the public calling them about criminal activity or something happening.
警方也不会因为政府或者影响而失去独立性。我举个例子吧，政府并不能直接指使就是警察做出某种调查，但是警方呢是应该根据就是公众的投诉或公众的报案而做出有关的调查，但是并不会直接就是听命于政府。
Police are also independent from the courts. They're independent from city councils, and they're independent from our military. They're not connected to the military.
警方也不会受也并不受就是法院市政府或者是军方的就是干涉。
Okay. But they are accountable to civilian control, and they are accountable to your elected representatives. So they're accountable in Richmond to Richmond City Council, they're accountable to the provincial government, and they're accountable to the federal government as well in some cases.
但是警方当然需要负责，他们需要对市民负责，也需要对就是每位民选代表，因为每位民选的代表呢，他们就组成了3级的政府，他们也需要对3级的政府负责。
But that accountability means that the police are accountable to civilian control and oversight. So there is accountability for the police. Sure. I thought you'd catch up, but I can't if you want.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
So for the police, there's multiple layers of accountability. There's the Police Act. So if you had a complaint about the police, you could file a complaint and it would be investigated independently through professional internal investigations.
那其实所以警方呢会受制于就是那个警方法，就是如果有人对警方做出投诉呢，警方呢是需要成立，就是是需要做一个独立的调查。
There's also internal labor processes like any other employer. Police will have their internal discipline codes and codes of conduct. So if I did something wrong, my boss could deal with me through the labor process, and there could be disciplinary action that happens there. So that's another level of accountability, although that is labor process internal, like any other company.
那当然了，就像每个公司或者机关一样，警方呢也有自己内部的规定，就是会对犯错犯事的警员做出惩罚。
But if police do something seriously wrong or make a serious mistake, intentionally or perhaps even accidentally or negligently, there are also the courts. Police are accountable to criminal courts and civil court.
那如果有警员犯了很严重，或者是或者是故意犯错，其实他们呢也会受制于咱们的刑事法庭，咱们法庭的就是他们还是需要对法庭就负责，也就是说他们犯错呢也会受到法庭的也会被法庭审判。
Of course, the media also holds the police accountable and scrutinizes virtually everything the police do. City councils also hold the police accountable through policy and through budgets. There's also the human rights tribunals that exist in Canada and every province. They can hold the police accountable if there's a complaint, and as do various community groups within your own community.
当然了，就也有很多的组织呢会对警方进行规管，包括呢大众媒体 包括市议会，因为市议会可以通过就是他们调配的资金，还有他们的政策做的调整来对就是警方做出监督。当然还有人权委员会，当然还有不少社区的组织都同时在监管警方。
So with any complaint, there can be formal or informal resolutions depending on what path the complaint takes. And just for information, in Vancouver, for instance, you might get 200 or 300 complaints a year, and that's out of probably a couple million contacts with the public from varying degrees of incidents. So you don't receive too many complaints.
投诉方面呢，可能就是大概以温哥华为例吧，可能每年会接到200-300个投诉，但如果你想想，就是警方每天都跟大众接触，就是他们可能一年之间跟大众接触的机会是有上百万次的，那这样算起来，其实并不算有很多的投诉。
I mean, bad things can still happen. We all saw George Floyd and that incident on TV. That was in America, but I mean, nobody would defend an incident like that. And the police were held accountable in that case, for instance.
就例如呢，就是有时候警方也会犯一些就是还会有一些严重的问题发生，例如之前在美国发生的 George Floyd 被不平等对待的事情呢，这些都是就是这些问题都。So did you say it's serious?
It's super serious.
Yes. Yeah. 就是
这
些问题都很严重。
Yeah. And in Canada, the policing system is fairly good in terms of professionalism, in terms of recruiting. Just as an example, like in Vancouver, in recruiting, for every 100 applicants, you typically hire maybe 6 or 7, less than 10% would actually get hired out of the people that would apply, because it's quite strenuous and you go through a lot of steps to be hired as a police officer in Canada.
加拿大的警方的制度也是很专业，因为他们也有一个很严谨的筛选过程，平均每100位申请者，可能最后就只会聘请6到7位。
I mean, there's physical tests. Clearly, you have to be physically fit, but there's written examinations, there's psychological examinations, there's polygraphs, there's background investigations and assessments, practical assessments of you. And in the end, the background investigation, you could have as many as 40 people interviewed, from employers to family to ex-girlfriends, ex-boyfriends. It's quite a thorough process to get hired as a police officer.
这个当然就是有各种的测试，除了体能测试呢，也要考笔试，也要做心理测试，当然还要就是还会就是做有关的背景的调查。那有时候呢，甚至可以问到就是跟申请者有关的，因为身边的人可能多达40位，就包括家人、朋友，甚至前男女友都会问到。
The pay and the training are quite good in Canada. You can, definitely the pay is a healthy middle class, perhaps upper middle class, depending where you live, pay scale. The training is quite extensive over a period of time with professional development that follows and additional training. And that's true of all police forces in Canada. I'm not talking about any one in particular, the RCMP as well as Toronto, for instance.
那个加拿大的警员就是加拿大的警方都会为警员提供非常良好的训练和培训。此外呢，他们的那个薪酬也很不错，那算是那个算是中产阶级的那个薪酬吧。那当然我现在我说的并不只限于就是本地的，我说的是包括是全国的警方的一个制度，就包括呢那个皇家骑警， 也包括呢就是在多伦多或者在其他地方的警方。
Education is a key component. Most of the recruits hired today have completed their undergraduate degree, and you even hire people with graduate degrees, engineers, lawyers, all kinds of people join the police service, different police departments, because they're looking for something that is more than just a job, even a well-paying job. There are people that believe in service and helping other people, and that's something that all police agencies look for in Canada. And so that's why you get some people making the change in life, because they see it as something where they can really help people in desperate situations.
本地警方的教育程度呢也非常良好，现在大部分聘用的警员呢都有大学甚至以上的学历程度。那其实警方也很看重就是警员对这份工作的态度，就是也看他们有没有一个服务精神，还是就是不会只把它当做一份工作。这也是为什么有很多人现在都也投入就是也成为警员，因为他们可能有更大的抱负，他们希望服务他们希望服务社区，或者是就是帮助有需要帮助的人。
Police officers are often quite well educated, quite well trained, and they are fairly paid, reasonably paid, well paid, depending on how you want to frame it. Diversity is another really important thing for policing in Canada. It's been decades that we've talked about having police that reflect the community we serve. My first day in the Vancouver Police Department, Jim Chu and Bill Chu were both in my class. And some of you may know Jim Chu because he ended up being the chief constable of Vancouver.
那警方的多元性也很重要，意思是说，我们警方的一个这个组织也应该反映呢人口的变化和比例。那例如吧，我第一天到警局的时候呢，当时呢，大家可能知道军区朱小春，他是前温哥华警察局的局长，他也是咱们一位华裔的前温哥华警局局长。当时呢，他也是我的同学。
So women, that's another outreach group. There's probably about 26 or maybe even 27% of the police officers in Vancouver that are women, and I think that's generally true in police services across Canada. So that's a big part of outreach as well, as reaching out to women.
当然，就是女性的警员在警察的制度也有一个很重要的角色。我大概现在我可以说大概26%到27%的警员都是女性。那这个可能是在温哥华的比例，但是呢，我相信呢，一般在全加拿大呢也会大概是这个比例。
So in the past 50 years, although Vancouver hired the first women, I think in 1912, but in the past 50 years, policing has changed a lot in what police officers look like. 60 years ago, a lot of them would have looked like me, European heritage, tall. But that's not the case now. And if you look around Richmond, you'll see that it's a very diverse RCMP detachment with people from all different backgrounds, male, female, and all different racial groups and ethnic groups represented.
我记得温哥华应该是在1912年左右呢，就是雇佣首个女警员。那但是可能你是讲到60年前的话，60年前可能警方呢会请比较多是欧洲移民或欧洲移民后裔，或是个子比较高比较大的，就像我自己。但是呢，现在已经不一样。如果我们再看看 Richmond 的话，其实呢，我们的就是都有来自不同的背景，就是不同的移民后裔，是非常多元的一个组合。那现在雇佣的警员呢，都跟以前不一样。
I notice the time is getting short, so I'm going to wrap things up a little bit. So the other thing that happens with diversity is there's a lot of language capability. If you look at a recruit class or a RCMP troop, when they graduate, you could have, out of 30 people, you might have 15, 20, 22 different second languages in addition to English.
语言也是一个重要的考虑。现在，例如现在可能有30个，就是刚毕业的警员呢，当中可能有15到22位呢都有第二语言。
So even if you don't speak English, there's probably a police officer not too far away that speaks, well, Mandarin or Cantonese would be probably pretty common for a lot of police, but also there's community groups that assist with translation, and family and friends, of course.
所以呢，现在就算您不会英语呢，在身边呢可能也会有一位会讲就是粤语或普通话的警员。那就算没有的话呢，我们也有语言机构可以帮助进行翻译。
So the big thing about police in Canada is actually you can trust the police in Canada, and that may not be the case where some people may have come from everywhere in the world, but you can trust the police in Canada. And the proof of that is, well, the proof is in many forms, but one way is to look around you and know that the police live in your community. They live next door. They live in the apartment above you, or they live in the house beside you or behind you. Police don't live in compounds here. We don't live in forts. We don't live behind barbed wire or big walls. We live down the street. We live beside the people that we police.
我认为加拿大的警方是值得信任的。那如果要证明的话，我会说本地的警员都住在我们社区，都跟大家融入。并不就是因为并不是每个国家都这样子。例如但是本地的警员他们并没有集中在一起，并没有住在一起。我们的警方都住在我们社区，都是我们的邻居。
So what to expect from the police? You know, if you got pulled over when you're driving a car or something, is expect the police to be professional. You can expect the police to be respectful and polite. It's almost inconceivable for me to even say this, but I know it happens in other parts of the world. You won't be asked for a bribe.
就例如在本地，如果你被警方截停的话，他们还是会以非常专业的态度就跟您对您，他们会对您保持礼貌和尊重。但可能在其他国家、其他地方呢，他们可能会跟你收钱，但是这个在加拿大是不会发生的。
We police with very few police in Canada. I think in total there's probably 65. I think it's still under 70,000 police in Canada, and that's very few compared to a lot of other countries in the world. And why we are able to do that is because we have the support of the community we police. Generally speaking, despite mistakes and things that could go wrong, the police are seen as legitimate, and they are seen as trying to do their job in good faith and serving all people equally and fairly. And that's what police in Canada really covet, is to be seen as legitimate and fair.
在加拿大呢，如果有数字还准确的话，我们的警员的总人数是少于7万。那对一个国家而言呢，其实这个是一个非常小的数字，但为什么还能就是维持社区的治安呢？是基于大众对警方的支持。我之前也说了，虽然警员可以犯错，但是呢，大众呢还是认同警察的合法性，相信他们也是依法诚实的办事。 也相信他们就是对待每个人都是公平公正的。
Last thing I'm going to say is advice I gave to my kids growing up, and I still follow it myself. Because if there's a police car behind me, I get a little bit nervous still.
就是我还想说一点，就是例如我现在是对我就是对我自己的小孩，就是So are you talking about talking to your kid?
Yeah.
To your kids
when my kids were growing up, I'd give them advice.
And then you still following.
And I'm going to say what the advice is in a second.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So 就是我即将跟大家分享的是我从小到大就对我的子女的一些建议但是呢，我觉得到现在呢就依然是依然能应用的。
So if the police do stop someone for some reason in the middle of the night or the middle of the day, just follow their commands and be polite. That's what I tell my kids, because you don't know what the police are actually dealing with or what they're responding to. And so if there's a problem, it can be sorted out later on. But in the immediate situation that the police are dealing with, if they say, turn off your motor or show me your driver's license, my advice to my own children was just follow their direction.
如果在任何时间，包括半夜，就是你被警方截停，然后我一般的建议都是遵从警方的要求，就算他要求你停车，就是出示证件等等就是我会建议你遵从指示，保持礼貌，因为你永远不知道他们正在处理的是什么样的一个情况。那在这种情况下呢，我会建议你遵从警方的指示。
Having said that, we have to remember what I said earlier is that really the most important thing for police is to have the respect and support of the people they serve. And that's why community policing is a big part of how we police in Canada. So, thank you.
我刚刚也讲过，那必须再说，就非常重要的一点就是警方必须要得到大众的尊重还有支持。这也是为什么我们就是我们在每个社区做的就是工作，就是都要做好，因为呢，这个就影响到大众对我们的印象。谢谢。
Thank you, Andy. Very insightful, especially the 9 principle. 非常感谢 Andy 跟我们今天这个分享他其实分享的就是做警方这个作为执法机关他所遵从的9大的原则这个原则呢我也发在我们的聊天室里面了。Okay, we have some questions from the chat room, and the first one came in here is from Melody Pan, and she's asking, what are the rules to use lethal weapon?
Well, there are very well-established rules. In a nutshell, police aren't allowed to use lethal force unless their life is threatened, or they're threatened with grievous bodily harm, or the life of another person is threatened, or they're threatened with grievous bodily harm, and there's no less means to prevent that from happening. So basically, your life has to be at risk, or a life of another person, or serious harm. And there's nothing less that you can do to prevent it.
刚刚的问题是到底警方什么时候能使用致命的武器？那其实一般而言呢，警方是不能使用致命的武力或者武器的，他们只有自己或是他人的生命受到威胁，或者他们即将受到，或者他人就是警方或者他人即将受到非常严重的人身伤害，只有这个时候呢才能使用致命的武器或者武力。
Okay, thank you, Andy. I think one more thing is Andy just mentioned about if there's no other means. which means there's no other method other than lethal weapon has to be used in order to prevent to stop something happening. 我想这个我跟大家再加一句，就是说，如果警方在使用这个致命武器的时候，如果是他们没有在其他的一些更不致命的这种方式去处理的话，就是他没有这个其他的选择的情况下，他才可以使用。他除了就是他有两个最重要的两个原则，第一就是任何人包括他们自己的生命受到威胁的时候，然后呢也没有一些其他的更轻一些的武力的这种使用的方式的时候，他才可以使用这种致命武器的比如说包括开枪，对不对 ？OK， 我想这个是补充一下 ，OK。The next question is from Dr. Ali Wong, and she's writing in Chinese. She said that Vancouver, Chinatown is being vandalized again. So what should we do? And if we report to the Vancouver police, and other than just reporting to the police, and do you have any suggestion? Yes, from a community perspective, what can we do?
Well, yeah, you should definitely work with the police and continue reporting things to the police, but you should also work with the city of Vancouver and probably Success and different community groups in the area, because there's many contributing factors to what's happening in the downtown east side and in Chinatown. And the solutions aren't easy. The police can't solve it all, and City Hall can't solve it all, but you do have to work as a collective group. So I would say you have to make your voices heard and make your voices count when it comes to your local government.
那就这些问题呢，如果需要关注的话，你们要保持发声。那除了当然刚刚说了，其实你们需要就是有看到问题，你们需要继续跟温哥华警方报案。但是呢，你们也可以把你们的声音就是带给市政府，还有包括 SAAHCAG 就是中小互助会等等，因为这些问题呢，往往并不是警方或者是市政府或者是中小就是单方面能解决的，所以他们都需要各方面就是一起出力。
Okay, thank you.
I mean, just to add, if I can just add to that for a second, I mean, there's big issues that impact Chinatown and the downtown east side and everywhere. There's housing issues, right? There's a housing crisis going on. There's mental health issues happening where people aren't receiving the services they require or the medication, or they're self-medicating. There's poverty issues and addiction issues. So there's a lot of things happening that require a lot of resources to actually improve the situation for Chinatown.
我想说一点就是唐人街的情况比较复杂，因为它也涉及到就是包括温市中心东端也有这样的问题，就是包括他们有房屋问题，有情绪健康问题，有贫穷问题，也有毒品的问题。所以这也是为什么说我们需要各方出力一起就是共同解决，并不是就是这些并不是一方就能单独解决的问题。
Okay, thank you, Andy. And the next question from in the chat room is someone's asking. Someone said, "Thank you for the informative seminar. Are there any statistics show that the criminal cases increase in Vancouver related to refugee?"
I don't know if those statistics exist or not. I'm retired, so I don't have access to all the statistics. But I think from my past, I will draw on some information that I read years ago. And I don't believe that is the case. I think statistically, from what I remember, you will find that people that are new to Canada, whether they're refugees or immigrants, are often very law-abiding. And so based on old information, I don't think that would be the case.
刚刚问题是关于说有没有任何数据的统计就显示罪案就跟难民就罪案的上升是否跟难民有关？那 Andy 想说，其实他已经退休了，所以他并就是没有任何有关的 有关的数据，但是根据他以前所看到的，他并不认为罪案上升这个事情呢会跟新移民或者难民等就是有关联。
Thank you, Andy. The next question from Ping is immigrants with PR the status can now apply for police. Okay, I didn't know that. And from your experience, and what is the best, in order if someone wants to apply for a policing job, what should they prepare and compared to locals? I mean, probably means citizens or who then as a PR holders, permanent residents, and what they need to be prepared.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that fact, but let's just go with what they should do to prepare. One of the things that I think all police agencies look for is just, solid citizens. And a big part of that is volunteer work and what you've done for the community. So are you somebody who's shown a pattern of service throughout your life? Maybe it's for your church. Maybe it's for your community group. Maybe it's for success. Maybe it's coaching, whatever. Do you have a pattern of volunteering and serving the community? It's one thing.
OK， 刚刚其实讲到这点呢，刚就是有人提出，现在就是那个有枫叶卡的移民也可以申请，就是警方的警员的职位。这方面其实我不太确定啊。不过呢，就如果要回答这个问题的话呢，我认为其实警方还是很看重服务精神，也就是说，很看您在社区到底有没有一直就是持续的当义工或者做贡献，不管是教会也好，当体育教练，就是当一些运动队伍的教练也好，这方面尤其重要。
Other things that are important is your education. You should be working on that because your competition will probably have a bachelor's degree at least.
那教育也很重要，因为别忘了，我之前说过，有很多现在雇佣的警员都起码有大学的，就是您的竞争者很有可能都已经有大学的学历。
And something I always told people when they were thinking of this was live your life in a consistent manner with what you're trying to do. So if you want to be a police officer, you should be living your life with those values. You should have integrity. You should treat people respectfully. You should be honest and compassionate. Many different values, but I'm just saying you should live consistently. Don't live one way and then try to say you want to do something that is completely inconsistent with how you behave.
这也关乎其实您对人生的态度，其实你的生活方式也需要，就是如果你是就是你的生活态度，就如果你是喜欢，你就是想当警员的话，那你一直必须保持诚信，就是对人尊重，因为这些生活态度并不应该就是因为你申请工作或者是其他因素而有所改变，你应该一直按你自己的态度去过自己的去过生活，那这点呢也很重要。
And work history is important. Whatever your work is, just be a hard worker, be an ethical worker, and be the kind of employee or employer that people want to work for or work with.
当然了，你过去的工作也很重要。其实你必须证明自己是一位勤奋的员工，而且你要what's the second hardworking and then
hardworking, ethical, the kind of person that somebody wants to either hire or work with or work for.
你也需要有良好的道德操守，这样别人才会想跟你共事。
Thank you, Andy. And I think the same person in the chat room is asking about interviews. Okay, I think maybe Oh, this says for a 3 hours interview. Can you actually give us some ideas, what to prepare for an interview to apply for a police job?
Sure. I mean, the first thing is just be prepared to be open and honest. It's not a trap, and just give open, honest, candid answers to whatever the series of. I mean, I did this. I was in recruiting for a few years, and you're not looking for perfect people. If police were only looking for perfect people, I never would have been hired.
首先一点呢，你要保持就是对提问呢，就保持诚实，还有保持开放的态度，就是每个问题你都应该真诚的回答，老实的回答，因为呢。警方并不在乎你是否给出完美的答案。如果他们每个要求的答案都完美的话，他们就不会请我了。
So some people may have tried drugs at some point in their life when they were younger and going through a tough time. Some people may have been involved in a fight or something like that. Everybody has some baggage. And really, the older you are, probably the more baggage you have.
就举个例子吧，可能有些人年轻的时候有滥用过毒品，或者是小时候有打过架。其实呢，我们每个人在人生当中都有不同的包袱。那可能就是您年纪更大的话，就累积了更多的包袱。
So people get hired with a variety of issues. The one thing that will get you not hired like that.is if you demonstrate a lack of integrity.
但是就是纵使有不同的人生包袱的，那有些人还是会被警方雇佣。但有一点可以很确切的跟你说，如果你没有诚信，警方是绝对不会雇佣你的。
So police are tolerant of mistakes. They are intolerant of a lack of integrity or honesty. So.whatever your issues are, whatever your past, and whatever the topics are that you're talking about, just try to be as direct and frank and candid as you can be. And usually that's the best path to take.
警方可以接受别人犯错，但是呢，不能接受没有诚信、不诚实的人。所以我的建议真的很简单，就是你们就直接诚实的回答问题，这个是最好的对策。
Yeah, you're not going in for an interrogation. You're going in for kind of a behavioral interview, and they're just trying to get to know you and see what kind of person you are. So it's not like on TV where you're going to end up confessing to some heinous crime or whatever. This is a very kind of informal but structured interview where they're trying to get to know you as a person.
要注意的是，虽然都是警方问你问题，但其实你并没有被拷问或是盘问，其实他们只想了解您的为人，所以并不需要太惊慌，就觉得好像在电视上就是可能有些人就在被逼供，就被认罪一样，其实他们只想了解您的个性。
Thank you, Andy. There's another question is about age requirement or expectation for the applicants to a police job. Is there any requirement?
Yeah, I believe the minimum age is still 19. I don't think that's changed. But in reality, like I mentioned, Jim Chu and I joined the same day. He was 19 and I was 20. That was a different era. I think the average age last time I was aware of it was probably about 26 for the Vancouver police. And I think the RCMP would probably be similar. So what you're finding is applicants, like I said before, usually have their degree, usually have some life skills. And so they might have been so they're usually a little bit older. So probably in the range of 25.
据我所知呢，你就是必须成年才能就是成为警员的，也就是满19岁才行。那我之前其实我刚进我刚进去就是警局的时候，我当时就20岁，那个时候朱小春19岁。那我相信呢，现在温哥华警方的平均年龄大概26岁左右吧。 其实这就反映了你其实需要有一定的学历，也有一定的人生的阅历或能力就是才会去那个申请警察。
Okay. Another question is regarding the someone's saying if someone doesn't have a law profession, so do they need to be prepared in terms applying for a job in the police force? I mean, from a knowledge of law perspective, or do they get the trainings on that and when they are hired?
Yeah, no, you don't need to have a knowledge of law, and you don't need to already be trained. What the police are looking for actually has more to do with people's values and attributes and characteristics. Now, having said that, it's helpful to have, an idea of, policing in Canada and some of the things that we've talked about tonight, for instance. But no, you don't need to be trained as a police officer or have a specific background.
我其实你要成为警员，你并不需要在法律方面接受过任何特别的训练或者去上什么课，但是警方其实更看重是你的价值观还有你的能力。那当然我认为就是法律这一块呢，其实你并不需要之前就受过任何训练，但是呢，我认为你应该对跟警方有关的议题或者时事呢，都要保持都要一直关注，就像我们今天提到的一些话题一样。
I mean, education-wise, you'll get people with science degrees, economic degrees, political science, history, all kinds of backgrounds educationally. To prepare yourself, if you're serious, you can try volunteering. All police agencies have community police offices and volunteers for speed watch or crime prevention or victim services. So if you really want to get some exposure and some background, you could probably volunteer in a number of different capacities. That would help.
其实有很多就是大学毕业生，不管是科学、经济或者是政治，他们就是警方呢都会雇佣，并没有一个特别倾向说哪一个比较好。但是我会建议，如果你有兴趣当警察的话，我会建议你先从当义工开始，就包括就是警方呢在社区办公室呢一直都在招募义工，他们也有就是防止罪案的部门，当然也有就是受害者服务的办公室等等啊，其实这些呢我都会鼓励大家去先当义工，了解一下有关的工作。
Okay, thank you, Andy. I have other people sending me direct chat message to my phone, and I won't be able to read it because also we don't have enough time. One thing I think before we finish today is remember you shared with me some advice about getting pulled over by a police officer, whether you are driving. And I think it's very interesting, also valuable. I want to share with tonight's audience. It's 我想跟大家分享一个之前 Andy 跟我见面的时候呢，我们聊天的时候他给我的一个非常有用的一个小的一个 tips， 做一个警察的一个角度来，就比如说如果你是被一个警车拦下来在路上，然后呢他告诉我作为司机，你第一点你要把车里的灯打开，第二点把所有的车窗给摇下来。当时我是完全完全不知道，我说为什么呢？原来作为一个警察的一个角度，他在执行任务，他停下你的车，他不一定是因为你的问题，他可能是在调查一个偷车案或者是一个很严重的一个案件他有的一个车子呢跟你的车可能相差的差不多，所以呢他不知道你车里有什么东西，对不对？所以呢为了更好的配合警方，你没有什么可以隐瞒的地方，你把车灯里面车的 compartment 就车厢里面灯打开，晚上的话白天当然就不用了，但是把车窗全部摇下，这样呢警察就会很舒服的就看到你的配合度这其实是一个我觉得非常值得跟大家 去分享的这样的一个信息啊，So yeah, I'm talking about when you when someone is pulled over by a police car. So and you told me before, right? And make sure you have your compartments light on if it's in the night, and make sure you have all the windows lowered. Okay, so that means you show your cooperation and then respect to the police officer, who is approaching you from behind. Okay, and I think this is very useful information, and I really want to share with today's people who are attending our workshop, and I can see we are now at almost 8:17, and Dr. Ali Wong. Ali, are you here? Do you have anything to add?
No. So thank you. So, but
okay.
I think we haven't enough time. I don't know. So I think we still can give our audience some time to
some questions.
Yeah, question time. Yeah.
OK， 如果我们大家还有问题的话呢，请把这个问题发给对所有人这样写，这样我可以看到。因为如果只是发给我手机这个 participant 的话，我的手机荧幕太小，根本看不清楚啊，所以甚至我看到一些老百姓，我看一下 ，OK 有了。一般老百姓如果碰到困难报警求助，他们能替我们做什么帮助或者阻止危害？一般他们都会说，处理犯罪行为。一般老百姓的纠纷不管。OK， the question is about regular people who are having difficulty to report to asking help when they report to the police, and what can they do to us in order to prevent harms, or normally they will just say police is in the middle of trying to handle criminal cases or activities, and they don't really care about civil disputes. I think that the question is about if there's a civil disputes between regular peoples, and someone says that they want to call the police, and what will be the police most response about that? And can you share something with us?
Sure, I've been to lots of civil disputes, and basically the police role there would be to maintain the peace and kind of keep order and make sure nobody got hurt. But the police won't solve your landlord-tenancy dispute or an argument over ownership of a boat or something like that.
那一般遇到这种所以算是就是民间民事的一些纠纷吧，其实警方呢还是会维持就是安全，就确保没有人受伤害，但是他们并不会帮你解决就是那个纠纷里边的问题呢，包括 OK 就是例如那个车子是谁的，或者是那个房客，还有就是房客租户的一些问题等等，这些警方是不会干涉的。
Okay, thank you. Another question from the people is if they don't speak English when they call 911 or they ask for police help, or they're pulled over by a police car. So what can they do?
Well, calling 911, I think ECOM will be able to help them if they can't speak any English at all. The other thing is if you have the opportunity, get a family member or friend who can speak English to assist with the call to 911, but you might not be able to do that. So ECOM should be able to help you through that. In terms of being pulled over and not being able to speak English, the easiest thing to do is you still should have a driver's license or some identification, and you can show that to the police even if you don't understand what the police are saying. And like I said before, police in Richmond are pretty diverse. Even our last chief superintendent was William Ng, and our new superintendent is a South Asian member of the RCMP. So there are a lot of language skills within the detachment, and there are also community services that assist the police, like Success, for instance, has a long history of working with the police. Mosaic was another group. ECOM is the emergency communication center that when you dial 911, that's the physical place. That's where all the lines go.
就如果就是你不会英语，但是你打911的话呢，一般的接线中心呢还是会尝试就是尝试帮你去处理并安排语言服务的。那至于当然就是我理解这个情况呢，并不是每次都能做到。当然，如果你有能说英语的家人能帮你就是协助你报案，那就更好。当然我知道这并不可能每次都可以这样子。至于就算如果你被警方拦下来，其实你就算不会英语，有些东西你还是可以简单的配合的。就例如你可以把你自己的驾照准备好，就算你不会讲英语，你还是可以把驾照交给警员，这样就能显示你的配合。至于我之前也讲过，其实Richmond 就是那个在列治文的警方呢都是的种族都是很多元的。那我们之前的首长是一位华裔，那现在呢是一位南亚裔的首长。那但是呢，就是也有会相关的警员可以提供有关的语言服务。那还有包括当然就是 Mosaic 中小等等的一些社区的组织呢，也可以提供语言服务。
And I will check on ECOM just to make sure my information is current on their translation services.
不过呢，就关于刚刚说的那个界限，就是紧急界限的中心呢，他们有否提供那个翻译的服务呢？我等会儿还要再就是查清楚。我会再确认。
OK， 好，谢谢 Andy 今天的分享。聊天室里面还有其他的朋友是想用语音来问问题这个我要问一问王博士，我们现在这个Zoom 的 meeting 是可以开语音吗？
我们还有3分钟，我看到还有最后一个问题，from Ping the last question. So could you read it to Andy, Ivan?
Okay. Ping is asking for in terms of qualification. And if a diploma, okay, is the current status of someone who want to apply for a police position, and other than volunteering or having a kind of heart and so what else does this person need to prepare in order to have applying to a police position to be successful?
Well, a solid work history is actually really important. I think the police still, they did when I was there, still place a lot of importance on your employment record, no matter what it is. How were you, as I mentioned before, as an employee or a manager or a coworker?
其实有一个就是你的工作的经验，还有一个稳健的工作历史呢，也非常的重要。这方面，这个是警方相当看重的。就除了刚刚提到的其他几点之外
，and other skills, they all accumulate. So, I mean, were you a swimmer? Were you a lifeguard? You have life-saving skills. What other volunteer work have you done? Police do look for volunteer activity with applicants. I think it's reflective of the person's character.
他们真的还会看就是申请者其他的一些资历，就除了刚刚讲到的就是义工的经验之外，例如你会不会游泳，你有没有当过救生员，其实这些都会考虑在内。
And education is important. You have to have that as well. And the other thing that's really important is just, as I said before, how you've lived your life. You're applying to be a police officer, so have you lived your life consistent with that aspiration? Now, mistakes you might have made, hopefully were a little bit in the past. If you had a tough time when you were 14 or 15, your parents were getting divorced or something, you might have gone through a tough period and you might be 25 now. Those kind of things can be addressed.
那刚刚还有教育，当然也相当重要。不过最重要的更重要就是说， 你一直的生活，你有否就是你过去怎么过活，你以什么样的态度过活？这个也非常重要。就是如果你以前有犯过错，那希望呢是更早以前发生的。但是你在申请之前，其实你在这段人生当中，你是以怎么样的一个方式、一个态度去过活？这个也是非常生活，这也是非常重要。
Yeah, I think police are looking for people who have kind of an early demonstrated record of giving back to the community. Like when I think of like my biography, and it's the same for other members that I know, they probably started volunteering and serving other people from a relatively young age. And hopefully you continue with that in some form. And it can be all different types of service. It's not one type. It can be all kinds of things. Food banks.
还有一点就是你是否有一个记录，就是一个良好的，就是有一个记录，就是证明你在很早的时间，比较很年轻的时候就已经投入这个社区，就因为这个就能看到你的服务精神。我刚刚也说了，其实有很多不同的社区组织你都可以参与，就是有关的志愿者活动，包括食物银行等等。那其实这些活动呢，都可以，就是如果你越早去参加，就代表你越早就投入到这个社区的服务里面。
Okay, thank you, Andy. We don't have enough time today, but it's very nice of you to share this information with us. And thank you, Sunny, for your translations. And I think we can host another section. I think people still have a lot of questions. Even myself, I have some questions, but I don't have time now to ask about this because, for example, I want to ask about what's the difference between the city police and the RCMP detachment? Okay, and how much we are paying the police in terms of from a taxpayers' perspective. A lot of things I think we can talk about police in our community. And so thank you again, Andy, for coming here, on a Tuesday night and spend your time to share those information.